Now to NBC5 investigates, which for months has followed the money trail tied to Chicago's migrant mission. Total spending now tops more than $400 million.
Now, despite the creation of a city spending website, it's still not exactly clear where all of that money has gone.
A few moments later.
I won't raise your property taxes.
Then candidate for mayor, Brandon Johnson.
A few moments later.
Mayor Brandon Johnson was more than 40 minutes into his speech before he broke the bad news to homeowners across the city.
This budget currently includes a property tax increase of $300 million to fund and keep our commitment to fund not just our pension contributions, but to fund the future of our city.
A few moments later.
Good afternoon.
I want to know, how does it feel that Trump is in office right now? You see that? The feds need to address you. DOJ need to address you, and hopefully Donald Trump will address you. Because you're going to protect the undocumented, while you're going to allow for the citizens in Chicago to suffer under your, what, 33%?
For a purpose and not for you to go touching it with $300 million that you want to siphon out of the citizens' pockets. Get rid of the illegals, and that'll take your money right back.
A few moments later.
The first breaking news at City Hall. Mayor Brandon Johnson's property tax hike is rejected by City Council.
It was an increase the mayor called to balance the budget. Sabrina Franza joins us live. Sabrina, a lot has happened in the last hour.
Jim Marie, it is unanimous. Every single alderperson voted down the mayor's $300 million property tax proposal. They say they have plenty of ideas. Now Mayor Brandon Johnson is going to be forced to listen to them.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson spent $400 million on migrants and now wants to raise taxes to pay for his generosity. Let's talk about it.
Begin with some breaking news on the Chicago City budget. It could be short nearly $1 billion. We just learned that's the shortfall Mayor Brandon Johnson is projecting for the 2025 budget.
And that means the city will need to make some tough financial decisions.
A nearly $1 billion shortfall. That's what the city of Chicago is facing for their 2025 budget. Mayor Brandon Johnson saying the city needs to find $982 million.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. See, we have two political parties here in the United States. We have the Democrats and the Republicans. Now, when it comes to the southern border, Democrats are let everyone come in and we can take care of the world. So you know the story. Chicago, New York, and other left-wing cities claimed that they wanted migrants to come there. They wanted open borders and claimed that migrants were welcome, no matter where they came from. Here is the Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson explaining how migrants are welcome in the city and they can handle it.
We know the strength of a city is determined by how we treat the most vulnerable. And so we choose to be a strong city. We must reject a zero-sum formulation between investing in those who have been here for decades and supporting those who have been sit here on a bus even this morning. We can do both, Chicago, and we can all thrive together.
Now, the same message was coming from other liberal states like New York, where the governor essentially begged migrants to come to New York.
We want people to come here, despite where they came from or despite the circumstances that drove them to this country and to this state. We say you are welcome here. We are welcome with open arms, and we'll work to keep you safe. We'll not only house you, but we'll protect you. And the richness of the culture and the diversity and the food and the restaurants that we know are going to be coming because of these efforts are beyond measure. It's an extraordinary part of our story, and it's woven into the story of New York, and it makes us more vibrant.
Now, this virtue signaling was great for politics, and since almost no migrants were coming to New York and Chicago, but were all staying at the southern border, then they could call the Republicans racist, and they could deny that stricter border policy was necessary. There were no consequences. But the governors in those border states came up with a solution. If cities like Chicago and New York wanted illegal immigrants, then let's send them there. This was a win-win. Those cities get the migrants, and they also get the problem that come with those migrants.
Local officials whose communities are being overwhelmed by hordes of illegal immigrants who are being dropped off by the Biden administration. Texas is providing charter buses to send these illegal immigrants who have been dropped off by the Biden administration to Washington, D.C. We are sending them to the United States Capitol, where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across our border.
Well, it has happened again. Another bus of migrants has been sent here to Los Angeles.
39 asylum seekers arrived by bus at Union Station today, sent by Texas, including 21 children.
Another wave of migrants arrived in New York City today.
Merecemos una oportunidad.
More than 4,000 have come since May, a metaphorical message from Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
Texas has sent another bus of migrants away from the state, this one arriving in Chicago last night. It comes after the state has sent more than 8,000 migrants to New York and Washington, D.C.
Then all of a sudden it became the migrant crisis and they started declaring states of emergency.
This morning, the mayor of Washington, D.C. has requested the help of the National Guard to assist with the buses of migrants arriving to her city.
Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey has declared a state of emergency to address the state's growing migrant crisis. The governor says there are over 20,000 people being temporarily housed across the state.
Our top story, another bus of migrants arrived today in Los Angeles and were taken to St. Anthony's Croatian Church for processing.
Back in New York, the mayor had a stark message this month.
I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City.
Increasingly, the migrant crisis is being felt far from the border, including cities like Chicago, where officials say resources are running thin.
So Mayor Johnson in Chicago, as you just heard, opened the doors up and said, we're going to take care of everybody.
We know the strength of a city is determined by how we treat the most vulnerable. And so we choose to be a strong city. We must reject a zero-sum formulation between investing in those who have been here for decades and supporting those who have been sit here on a bus even this morning. We can do both, Chicago, and we can all thrive together.
But there's a cost to that. And after 1 year of trying to take care of all the migrants, Chicago found itself in a $500 million hole.
The city opened its books today for the first time in a while, and the picture wasn't pretty. There's a $538 million deficit.
In April, Mayor Lightfoot forecasted an $85 million deficit for next year. 5 months later, that number has ballooned to a $538 million deficit forecast. Mayor Johnson writing this gap is driven by several factors, including rising personnel, pension, and contractual costs, as well as the cost to care for new migrants arriving to the city.
Now, Mayor Johnson had made a campaign promise not to raise property taxes.
I won't raise your property taxes.
But with the budget kind of ballooning like this to a $500 million deficit, how are you going to get that extra revenue? So the news media asked him outright, are you going to raise property taxes? Here's what he said.
I won't raise your property taxes.
Then candidate for mayor, Brandon Johnson.
The people of Chicago want to know, will you raise a tax, whether it be a property tax or implement something else?
Well, it's interesting. No one has ever asked me if I'm going to raise a tax.
In January, we sat down and asked the mayor multiple times if he'd use a property tax increase to pay for the city's debts. At the time, one of the biggest concerns was paying for the migrant crisis.
So you can commit to you not raising property taxes, regardless of how bad the situation gets.
Okay, I stopped the video. He's either going to say yes or no. He's going to say a lot of words, but either it's going to be a yes or no. Now, I'm assuming if it was a no, you say no, right? Because no is easy. But let's see what he says.
My budget, the $16.77 billion that I just passed, 41 alders, I believe, supported this budget. And we did all of that without raising property taxes. The evidence is in what I passed.
Now, after this interview, Mayor Johnson continued to spend large amounts of money on the migrant crisis until that number reached $400 million.
Now to NBC5 investigates, which for months has followed the money trail tied to Chicago's migrant mission. Total spending now tops more than $400 million.
It's August of 2022. The city of Chicago has spent more than $400 million, according to the city's spending website. Nearly $253 million went to one private company, Kansas-based Favorite Healthcare Staffing, which staffs the shelters. Another $76 million went to Equitable Social Solutions. That company partnered with another called ReloShare, which helped identify and sign lease agreements with property owners of the buildings that eventually became the migrant shelters.
So as you see, Mayor Johnson dropped $400 million on the migrant crisis, and millions more are piling up every month. Now, by September 2024, we were almost at $1 billion budget deficit.
The biggest question looming for Mayor Brandon Johnson is whether or not he will have to raise property taxes to offset a budget shortfall his team estimates will be just over $982 million next year. The mayor suggesting he's open to many options.
There are a litany or plethora amount of options that are on the table that my administration will be exploring collectively.
The mayor's team is budgeting $150 million for migrant care, the same as last year, despite the significant drop-off in the number of people being bused to Chicago.
So Mayor Johnson proposed, hey, I need $150 million for migrant care. If I raise taxes $300 million, I can take care of the migrants and a little bit more. So he says, you know what? Let's just raise property taxes $300 million.
Mayor Brandon Johnson was more than 40 minutes into his speech before he broke the bad news to homeowners across the city.
This budget currently includes a property tax increase of $300 million to fund and keep our commitment to fund not just our pension contributions, but to fund the future of our city.
Now remember, Johnson had promised not to raise property taxes when he was running, remember?
I won't raise your property taxes.
But now he is raising property taxes, or at least trying to raise property taxes. So the citizens, let them know how they feel.
Good evening, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I want to know, how does it feel that Trump is in office right now? You see the, you see the Mayor Brandon Johnson, you underestimate us.
Mr. Sims, direct your attention towards me, please.
You're a criminal. Why do I got to address you? The feds need to address you. DOJ need to address you, and hopefully Donald Trump will address you. Because you're going to protect the undocumented, while you're going to allow for the citizens in Chicago to suffer under your, what, 33%? See, Joe Lopez cooked that 3% up a long time ago.
What about our real estate? Because, see, we paid for these properties for a purpose and not for you to go touching it with $300 million that you want to siphon out of the citizens' pockets. Get rid of the illegals, and that'll take your money right back. Start it off with that.
So now the city council had a choice. Do they go with the mayor's $300 million plan, or do they reject it? Well, they unanimously rejected it.
But first, breaking news at City Hall. Mayor Brandon Johnson's property tax hike is rejected by City Council.
It is unanimous. Every single alderperson voted it down, the mayor's $300 million property tax proposal. They say they have plenty of ideas. Now Mayor Brandon Johnson is going to be forced to listen to them.
So you would think it would be over, but not really, because the mayor came back with a new proposal and said, okay, let's just raise property taxes $150 million.
Mayor Brandon Johnson announcing a budget breakthrough, saying he is humbled and grateful for the ideas that made it possible.
We have reduced the property tax levy by $150 million. And we hope this productive collaboration pushes us to find more progressive revenue sources and more efficiencies that will balance our budget.
There appears to be an agreement to tax cloud storage services. That would raise $128 million, and to hike fees on streaming services to raise another $9 to $10 million.
All right, so what do you think about the mayor of Chicago? He is in a bind, if I can ever see one. He wants to take care of migrants. He needs that $150 million, but the people aren't really willing to give it to him. And what do you guys think about the people in Chicago? Do they really deserve this? They did vote this guy in, and he wasn't progressive, and he was screaming he's going to help migrants. Now that cost something. And I still love the fact that when it was the people in Texas paying to take care of migrants, it was no problem. Now they got to take care of the migrants, and all heck has broken loose. Let me know how you feel in the comment section, because at the end of the day, immigration matters, and that is why probably Trump is going to be in the White House and Harris is not, because common sense means something nowadays. Don't forget, like, subscribe, do like great YouTube stuff. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, just one time, please. It's literally a one-time thing. Hit the button and join me on my way to 1 million. Later.